What would you do if your cute neighbor suddenly knocked on your door, and the next thing you knew, she was making you wipe her entire floor? That's exactly what happened to me one quiet Sunday morning. I had just moved into the small apartment building 2 weeks earlier, hoping for a fresh start after a difficult year. Life hadn't been easy. I had lost my job, my savings were shrinking, and every day felt like a slow climb uphill. That morning I was sitting alone with a cup of cheap coffee when someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, I saw her for the first time properly. My neighbor from across the hall. She was small, with soft brown hair tied in a loose ponytail and eyes that looked both shy and confident at the same time. I had seen her once or twice in the hallway, but we had never spoken. She smiled awkwardly and said, "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. Could you help me with something?" Before I could even ask what she needed, she held out a mop and a bucket. "I spilled something on the floor," she said, almost embarrassed, "and I can't clean it properly because my wrist is injured." I looked down at the mop, then back at her. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part of me was confused. Why would a cute girl ask her neighbor she barely knew to clean her floor? But something about the way she stood there, trying to hide the pain in her wrist, made it hard to say no. So I followed her into her apartment. The place was neat but simple. Sunlight came through the window, lighting up the wooden floor where a large dark stain spread across the kitchen tiles. She handed me the mop and thanked me again. While I started cleaning, she sat quietly at the table watching me. First, it felt awkward. Imagine cleaning your neighbor's floor while she watches you like you're some kind of janitor. But after a few minutes, she started talking. She told me her name was Lily. She had moved here 6 months ago. She worked at a small art studio nearby and lived alone. The injury in her wrist came from slipping on wet stairs 2 days earlier. I told her about my situation too. How I had lost my job at a tech company when they downsized. How I moved into this cheap building because it was the only place I could afford. She listened carefully. Not the kind of listening people do just to be polite. Real listening. When I finally finished wiping the floor, I leaned the mop against the wall and laughed awkwardly. Well, I guess that's the strangest way I've introduced myself to a neighbor. But Lily didn't laugh. Instead, she looked at the clean floor for a moment, then back at me. "Actually," she said quietly, "I didn't spill anything." I blinked. What? There was no accident. Now I was confused. If there was no spill, then why did she ask me to clean? Lily took a deep breath, like she had been holding something inside for a long time. "I've been watching you," she admitted. Not in a creepy way, but in the quiet way neighbors sometimes notice each other's lives through small details. She had seen me come home late at night, looking exhausted. She had seen me leave early in the morning in the same worn-out jacket, probably going to job interviews. "I wanted to know what kind of person you were," she said softly. "So I asked you for help." I stared at her, still trying to process what she was saying. "And you helped," she continued, "without complaining, without asking for anything." She paused. Then she said something that completely changed the direction of that day. "My boss is looking for someone exactly like that." Suddenly, the awkward moment in her kitchen felt like the beginning of something much bigger. But I had no idea yet that wiping that floor was about to change my entire life. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about what Lily had said. Part of me believed it was just a polite comment, the kind people make to encourage someone who's struggling. But another part of me held onto a small spark of hope. Around noon, there was another knock on my door. When I opened it, Lily stood there again, this time holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might want to meet my boss today," she said with a small smile. Within an hour, we were walking down a busy street toward a modern building with large glass windows. Inside was the art studio where she worked. Paintings covered the walls, bright colors everywhere, and people moved around discussing projects. Then I met him, her boss, Daniel. He was in his early 50s, calm but sharp-eyed, the kind of man who looked like he noticed everything. Lily briefly explained the situation and how I had helped her the day before. Daniel looked at me carefully. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you wiped my employee's entire floor without even questioning it?" I laughed nervously. "Well, I did question it, but she seemed like she needed help." He nodded slowly. "You'd be surprised how many people would have refused." The conversation turned into something like an interview, though it didn't feel formal. Daniel asked about my previous job, my skills, and what kind of work I was looking for. Then he said something unexpected. "We're expanding our digital department. We need someone who understands technology but also works well with people." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. 2 days later, I officially started working there. The pay wasn't huge, but it was stable. More importantly, it felt like a second chance. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to change. I woke up each morning with purpose again. The stress that once filled my chest started fading. And Lily and I became good friends. Sometimes we laughed about the strange way we first met. "You know," I told her once, "most people start friendships with coffee, not mopping floors." She smiled. "But if you hadn't helped that day," she said quietly, "none of this would have happened." She was right, because sometimes the smallest moments, like helping someone with a simple task, can open doors you never expected. And every time I walked past her apartment door after that, I would look down at the clean wooden floor and remember the strange day my cute neighbor made me wipe it and accidentally helped change my life forever.